Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tastemakers podcast. This is the podcast where we will taste everything in the TV and film world that you need to know about, and we will inform you about what you should watch, what you shouldn't watch, and what you need to know to be involved in the conversation. So you're not lost when somebody's like, "Hey, what's that new Star Wars show about?" We'll be like, we got you. We got you covered. That's what we're here for. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and with me this week is Josh Wicker. How you doing, Josh?
Hi, Taran. I'm very excited to be here filling in for Grace Leeder on the Tastemakers this week. What a cozy room y'all are podcasting from. It's like very dimly lit. There's a piano in the corner. That guy seems weird though, the dude who's playing it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a little bit.
not entirely sure why Rob hired a cricket, just like a 2 foot tall cricket with a top hat to play the piano here on RHAP, but I don't know. I don't know if I could do any better if I was in charge of the budget, Taryn.
Listen, we are not in charge of who gets hired or, you
We
know.
just are forced to work together.
Yeah.
We have to work with what we got, Taryn.
Yes. So this week on the podcast, last week we talked about we kind of caught up. We talked about our favorite shows of the year so far, but now we are getting into a more regular schedule where we will be here weekly to talk you through the latest in TV news and what we've been watching, what maybe you should be watching, and taking some feedback from you in terms of what we should be watching, so that we can relay it to the rest of the listeners. Today, this week, there's some big ticket items to talk about. Uh,
Yes.
First of all, House of the Dragon aired on
Ooh,
Sunday.
tasty little dragon show.
I mean, those dragons have a lot of tastes.
They do. They primarily have one taste, which is like charred corpse. Like if you go to like a store for dragons, like a food shop, it's just all charred meats.
I mean, pretty convenient to be able to instantly cook whatever you want to eat on the spot,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like dragons have no need for grills.
No, they are the grill.
Exactly.
Yeah. You thought bear
Uh,
was the grills.
Truly.
It's dragon. It's the
Yeah.
dragon grills you got to be worried about.
Um, The Acolyte, Star Wars The Acolyte on Disney Plus has begun airing, and quite a storm of poo it has raised.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh Rotten the audience score is for the Acolyte.
Lots to
So
talk about there.
lots
What's
to talk
going
about
on?
there.
Is it as
Yes,
terrible as people say it is? Let's find out.
we'll figure it out.
Uh, and of course, The Boys season 4 has started, and we'll check in on that and see how it's faring here over on The
No
Boys.
exploding appendages on the Tastemakers, Taryn. We will not be blowing up. There will be no gross out hijinks during the boys segment here on the
I
Tastemakers.
don't know that we can promise that.
Um, I'll edit it out if if I just start doing my superpower, which is NSFW. Then we're editing that out of the video, the audio, the whole deal.
All right. Well, we will also check in with some other shows that we've been watching and checking out for all of you. But let's get straight into it here, Josh. We were live on Sunday night talking about House of the Dragon. I enjoyed it. I think
I
you
liked
did.
it too. Yeah, I did.
Yes.
I did. I will say
Um,
though that the episode finished airing and then I went back about my life and haven't, regarded it a ton since. I don't know if
mm,
are you still chewing on House of the Dragon the next day? Are you feverishly reading every single headline that you can? Is this
I
like
was
the GOT days of old?
I was a little focused on the word choice of chewing there.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Are you charcoal grilling all of the hot D news that's fit to print?
I would say a little bit. I was definitely like reading in on some stuff, on some reactions. I think unfortunately for me, most of the discussion around the episode has either been like, "Oh, it's good, it's back, this is fun," and then like most of the sort of reader critique is like, "Oh, it was different than the book."
Yeah.
And that has not been the most interesting for me to read personally. I didn't really mind that it was a little bit different from the book. Maybe some people would say it was a lot different from the book. Taryn, what do you think?
Sure. Yeah.
But I think overall the response has been positive, and I think more than anything, I'm excited to sort of get back into the groove, and I'm not quite sure I'm there yet.
Yeah. Well, if you aren't like seeing all of the, the desirable headlines, then you're not reading the right places, Taryn, because I was exposed to a riveting article about House of the Dragon today, which is the puppy interview. House of the Puppies, Taryn.
Oh no.
Yeah. BuzzFeed got the full cast of House of the Dragon together for a puppy interview. And if you're not watching the video version, then you're missing out on actors as fine as Emma Darcy, Olivia Cook, Matthew Smith, and he has a real name. It's Fabian Frankel, but that dastardly Kristen Cole. And they're just playing with a bunch of dogs, so maybe it makes you like them a little bit more. I don't know. The memes have been
Maybe.
strong. The dog interview is good. They're just hanging out with dogs and playing with dogs. There's some good video. I bet by the time this episode of the Tastemakers is out, Taryn, the puppy interview has taken the internet by storm. That's my guess.
I'm realizing that this should be all interviews and, quite frankly, podcasts. We should just have
Yeah.
dogs and
I
cats. I
have
mean, you have a
my
cat in the
cat is
background.
wandering around today, yeah, but I don't think he's gonna participate much in the podcast.
It's like what, aside from the occasional barking, like, what's the downside to just
And doesn't
having
that, yeah, just
dogs?
remind you of like we're all still alive. There's a dog on a podcast. Didn't think that was gonna happen. Yeah, because it's a twist, right? We're just trying to keep you on your toes with plot twists left and right on RHAP.
Well,
Puppies on the pod. You've no idea what's
HBO
coming next.
HBO had a lot of faith in the Game of Thrones universe franchise. Season 3 for House of the Dragon has already been announced, and they even it was revealed, I think a few days ago, from George R. R. Martin that, the 10,000 Ships, I believe, spin-off show, which was previously shelved, has been revived, theoretically.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. So the source on this is George R. R. Martin himself, who, if you are not interested in, if you're coming to the podcast for your source of news, first of all, we love that and we hope to provide here. But one of the things that, if that's not something that's habitual for you, maybe is that you don't know that George R. R. Martin was like the final live journalist. He was the last one, Taryn.
yeah,
George R. R.
true.
Martin for like kept live journal in
Writing about
business.
football games.
Yeah, writing about the Jets, just like Giants terror, not the Frost Giants. So he was using LiveJournal forever. He's, I think, switched platforms at least, but he's still like a prolific blogger. And his blog tends to be one of the greatest sources for news about what's happening in the Game of Thrones space. And in a George R. R. Martin blog post this week, he was talking about the fact that he is going to be doing the 10,000 Ships show, which is probably, I think, that would be the earliest that we've gone in the Game of Thrones timeline if that ends up showing up. I think some, hundreds of years before even Aegon's conquest, I think, is where that would take place.
Cool. Quite a departure. And again, I think it shows a lot of faith in the series and the universe. I think House of the Dragon season 1 did so well. I think we're still waiting to hear how the first episode of season 2 did so far, but I think expect a lot more Game of Thrones
Yeah,
thrown our way.
yeah.
Speaking of franchises, though, although actually, hold on, wait, no, there was one more thing, one more very important thing
There
about
is a
Game of
very important thing.
Yes.
You've heard a lot about what's going on in the House of the Dragon fan community, but Taryn, have you heard about the fact that Vagar the Dragon is in New York City? I know that you have because I said as much on the live podcast on Sunday night. Well, I'm very excited to share with our listeners that if you're a New York based House of the Dragon fan, you can go and see Vagar yourself. Vagar's here, baby. Vagar's in New York and visitable at the Empire State Building until June 19th. I think that's, if you're listening in the real time, that's tomorrow, gang. You got to get to New York
Yeah, there's
fast.
a very limited amount of time to go see, Vhagar,
Can I tell you
which
something that is like the last thing that I ever want to do in my life is to
sure,
go to the top of a famous New York skyscraper where a dragon is awaiting me.
but he's protecting New York, they have declared for the Greens.
If you're watching the video version, like, does that look like someone who's protecting you, or does it look like somebody who's trying to eat my wallet, literally? Like,
I mean, it does look a bit expensive.
it's pricey.
$46.
It's pricey. I'm just saying it's pricey. So I don't know. I don't know how much more of like the insane hot D marketing machine we're going to be getting as the weeks
Mm,
progress, but I hope the answer is a lot.
hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully. All right, let's talk then about The Acolyte because this is the new Star Wars show from Disney Plus. They've been kind of mucking about with their Star Wars shows. They started very strong with The Mandalorian, with little Grogu, little baby Yoda,
Yeah.
um,
Do you do a
which was a
baby
big hit.
Yoda?
What's that?
Do you do a baby Yoda?
Do I do a baby Yoda?
Yeah, do you have one at the ready? Do you do like a or whatever he says? Isn't that what he says?
I didn't know he talked all that much,
I
to be
think his
honest.
signature catchphrase, "Wow,
Roar.
where are we going this week?" You know? That's my favorite part is how every episode of The Mandalorian starts with Baby Yoda saying, "Dad, what's next?"
Yeah, he does a voiceover, it's great.
Uh-huh. Yeah. We're missing that on these other Star Wars shows, I think.
Um, started strong, I think. The Mandalorian, I think, a little bit starting to, get a little samey, right? Like, we've gotten a lot we got Boba Fett,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
got, Ahsoka, and all of the they're starting to all blend together. They all look the same to me. And so the Acolyte was I think a promise for something different, right? It takes place in a vastly different time period than the usual Star Wars fare, and that gave it some space to be perhaps a bit of a departure, a bit unique. And it came out it began airing, I think on the 4th, and,
June the 4th be with you.
there you go. It was met with, quite the dissent from the fans that
Yeah, and you're
they
not
do
talking about,
not
like,
like.
descent in terms of Skywalker lineage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do not like the Acolyte. Now, the tricky part here is that the rating for the Acolyte was, I think, roughly like 30% or like a 3 out of 10 before the first episode even aired.
Yes. Yeah.
And so this quickly became, I think, apparent to me when I'm trying to figure out, is the Acolyte good? Is it worth watching? That it's going to be difficult to determine based on the audience score response because it doesn't seem very reflective of reality. It
No.
seems reflective of perhaps like an organized and or unorganized campaign to make it by far the lowest rated thing in
Yeah.
the history of Star Wars.
Andor had nothing to do with this. Andor innocent here on this one. But I do have the Rotten Tomatoes page pulled up,
Mhm.
and I think that this is always instructive to look at. For those who do not use the Rotten Tomatoes all that often, you get two different scores on the tomato meter. This is how all of the shows and movies are rated by critics and by the audience. And we aggregate the different scores, and you get two very different sets. So critics were largely positive, at least as far as I saw in the run up to Star Wars The Acolyte dropping. A bunch of journalists who I really trust who had seen those episodes really liked it quite a bit. To your point, I think that the negative audience scores were already starting to show up before the episode even arrives
Mhm.
on June 4th. And at this point, as of June 17th, as Taran and I are recording these words with maybe 24 ish hours to go before episode 4 drops on Disney Plus. It's 84% from the critics, 15% from the audience. Gee, Taryn, how to explain the disparity?
Yes. So this has been the big kind of controversy where there's all this discourse about where is this negativity coming from? And a lot of it is being attributed to the fact that the lead character is black, and the showrunner is a woman.
Yeah.
And I've seen like memes and things about like with like the showrunner's face being like women can do it better and then showing the audience score and being like ha woman.
Hmm.
And then there's like the other side of it where it's like then when that's pointed out, then it's like whoa, I can't dislike the show without being sexist or racist. Like geez, all right, Disney, blame the audience for your show sucking.
Right.
Um and so there's all this it's just like wrapped up in the culture war, and it's very confusing, I think, for just a person who wants to know, is it good though?
Yeah.
Like,
Is it
is
good
it
though?
actually good or does it actually suck or is it somewhere in between?
This is why you and Grace were put on this planet, Taryn. You and Grace were put on this planet for the Tastemakers experience, which is, folks, if you're listening to this, you don't even need Rotten Tomatoes anymore. You've got Grace and Taryn to tell you if it's good or if it's bad, and you could use that as your own system. Jokes aside, like, a Rotten Tomatoes or even like sort of like the consensus opinion around something for me as a consumer anyway, Taryn, is relatively useless. I find that like I like the thing I like, I don't like the thing I don't like, and I'm not going to get overly influenced by what the consensus is going into it. What I do find useful is whose opinions do I like? Whose
Mm,
opinions do I trust, even if I don't like their opinions? Do I trust that this is this person's opinion? Do I trust that this writer or this reviewer or this blogger or whoever has the courage of their convictions and means what they say? Because I feel like that can be increasingly rare in today's day and age. And so I seek those people out to see what they're thinking about the thing. And if they find it worthwhile, I'll typically give it a look. And so some people who I really do value their opinions on really loved The Acolyte. So that's what I looked at first and decided I already know. I didn't read the spoilers, Taryn, but I read the spoilers as far as what the audience's reaction to the Acolyte was going to be. How many
mhm,
different versions of this dance have we done? We're just sight on scene because the cast, the crew does not look like your quote unquote typical Star Wars team. And that's very loaded. It's going to happen, constantly. This exact sort of cycle that we're in. Um, so you do kind of have to like, how do you tune that out and then just like attune to your own experience of the show? Well, A, you watch the show, or B, you find the people whose opinions you trust and you lock into that. For me, the Acolyte, Taryn, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. I think the Acolyte, fine. Acolyte shows up Tuesday night. I'm getting weary, but not totally ready for bed. Amanda Stenberg shows up with little knives and a posse of people, a friend who uses a lightsaber as a flashlight. You're telling me I'm gonna meet a Jedi Wookiee? All right, I'll check this out. I'll check this out every single week, and I'll check it out before I have to sign into the hell sites and see what all of the racists have to say about it. And my review of it so far every week has been like solidly 7 out of 10, like 6.5 to 7 out of 10. Absolutely watchable, totally fine. This is the state of most of these major franchises right now, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, that if you can achieve a 6.5 to 7 out of 10, then like you're doing fine, sweetie. Like you're hanging in there. We're doing okay. We've got Chewbacca with a lightsaber. I'm mostly pretty happy, but I don't know what it says, or at least I don't think it says anything terribly great that my standards are there. Right? I think that my standards are there is an issue, is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing for me is that like I was deeply like an IMDb person. I was on the message boards. I was watching all the IMDb top 250. I felt like I understood that like the audience rating didn't necessarily mean that a movie was good or bad or that I would like it or not like it. But I felt like I had the code. the
Yeah.
IMDb movie ratings, right?
Like, you
Like
could divine it, you knew?
exactly. Like I
Yeah.
knew like, okay, this is a horror movie that has a 7.5. It's a really good horror movie. I'll
Okay,
probably really
yeah.
like this movie. Or like this is a Marvel movie with like an 8.2. I'll probably enjoy it. It'll probably be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Like you can I felt like I had the code, but the review bombing has been a thing lately that has messed with my IMDb radar, my audience radar in general.
You got
Um,
hacked. You've been hacked.
Truly, like when The Rise of Skywalker, which I personally think is the most garbage Star Wars thing that's come out.
Didn't you and Brent podcast
I
about that
did.
on post-show recaps once upon a time? Yeah, I
And you
think
know
you
what? And
did
I
that one because I did the podcast with Brent about The Last Jedi, and gosh, have I never been flamed harder in my entire life. You guys used to podcast every week.
and this is the thing when I say it was like it was just so aggressively average for like the final movie in a trilogy, right?
Yeah.
And then but then like Boba Fett came out and I couldn't even watch all of it. Like I was just so aggressively bored throughout the entire thing that I was just like man, that show is really bad. Rise of Skywalker on IMDb 6.4. The Book of Boba Fett on IMDb a 7.2, which
Yeah,
is to
yeah,
me
yeah.
absurd.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Um, The Acolyte a 3.5.
That's
Uh,
insane. That's insane.
yes. So here's the thing. If you don't care about the fact that there's a female showrunner and you have no interest in being upset about like lore changes theoretically or the
Yeah.
fact that there's like alternative things going like if you don't care about any of that, what I think is that the Acolyte is at the very least on par with Boba
Yeah.
Fett.
Yes.
And quite
I would
frankly, I
say
thought it was better.
it's better for sure in my opinion. Like Boba Fett has a couple of moments that are really great. It's just unfortunately it's the Mandalorian. You know,
Right. When
it's
Boba
like
Fett was the Mandalorian, it was pretty decent. When it was
yeah,
Boba Fett, it was, in my opinion, not watchable.
yeah,
My honest opinions on the Acolyte, and you can take this with whatever value you want, but genuinely, if you know me from my reality TV podcasting, you know that I am very much not afraid to bite any hand that feeds me when it comes
yeah,
to criticizing shows or anything like that. I do think that the Acolyte is deeply uninteresting to me.
yeah,
Like it was just from really like the opening scene to the end of the first episode. I've now watched 3 episodes and I'm just not interested in it at all. It has not enticed me. The characters are not interesting. The story is not interesting. The pacing, I think, in particular, is the worst part of all of these shows. And it's the same problem with all of these Disney shows for me that and it's been talked about, but it feels like it's a movie, like a 90-minute movie stretched out into 6 episodes.
yeah,
But at the same time, the pacing is so weirdly brisk. Um, it's to the point where it feels slow because nothing has any weight,
yeah,
for me at least. And so, would I recommend The Acolyte? Not really. Not unless you're fine with kind of just like, it's fine. It is watchable. Like it's not bad. It's sci-fi. If this show came on in like the early 2000s when I was like 10 years old, I would have been like, yeah, this is fun.
yeah.
But nowadays with as many options as we have, it's not something I would really waste my time on, quite frankly.
No, and
That
I
said,
yeah.
not nearly as bad as people are making it out to be.
Not even remotely close, in my opinion. Like I think all of that is just like such bad faith, and not even worth engaging, other than to state like, "Yep, that's that thing. You see that over there? That's the racist blob. Yep, you can just
It
now separate that out and now take a look at it and try and see
right.
what you think."
And that's
Uh,
what I would like recommend is that like, I think it is perfectly fine, as I just sort of showed you, like, to dislike the show, to not
yeah,
like it, to maybe even be upset about it because you don't like the lore changes or you don't like that they've continued to make the same show over and over. But I would say there is also some validity to the criticism that there are a lot of bad faith
yeah.
arguments being made against it, and be careful of, like, who you make your bed with when you engage in discussion about these shows.
Yeah. I mean, so the very basic premise for anyone who just doesn't know what it is beyond it's a Star Wars show is it's sort of like it's like a Star Wars I don't know, it's like sort of like a Star Wars true crime almost, you know. I don't think that that's totally right. I think that the way that it was described by Leslie Headland, who's the showrunner, she has described it as Kill Bill meets Frozen. Is what they're aiming for. I think you can see that. I think you can see like the rough shape of Kill
Yeah,
Bill
okay.
meets Frozen. So like that gives you like a little sense of the vibes. No music numbers yet, but you know, we're only 3 episodes deep, so we don't know. And it's following a character who has a score to settle and some Jedi murdering occurs. And so I do think that it's interesting that like here comes a Star Wars prequel essentially, right? This is a prequel's prequel. It takes
Mhm.
place prior to the prequels. It is called The Acolyte. It is named, presumably anyway, after a character who is taking their force cues from the bad side of the force. So there's already something that's sort of like interestingly meta about how the show is being met, baked into the premise as well. And I appreciate that at least that this major Star Wars vehicle is being made about like openly about the bad guy, as opposed to like we have to start with baby Jake and then we got to go to baby Hayden before we can go, and we never really even do truly go full Vader. So I think like I like that the execution leaves some wanting for sure, but Lee Jong Jae of Squid Game, the star of Squid Game, who is here as Jedi Master Soul, who it has been reported learned English to play this character, Taran.
Wait,
And
really?
I
That's impressive.
I believe that I
I would
believe that
not have known.
I believe what that actually is that he worked with a coach, he worked with the directors and the writers and everything to like really learn the lines and understand what he's saying and make sure that like he's delivering with the appropriate gravitas. In interviews, he's been using a translator and everything, but like even to learn that much English, to Taryn wouldn't have known, you know. And I think that he's really fun because he's playing a very straight by the book Jedi who sort of has a bit of a haunted quality to him. He says that he's based it on Qui-Gon Jinn is sort of the North Star for the performance that he's going for. For me, I'm really enjoying tuning in and watching him work and getting him to see like this is a great side benefit of Squid Game is just like more mainstream attention for this actor who's really quite good. Um, the action is passable. The world building so far is passable. There's a couple of like, wait, that's who that is moments. The Dean Charles Chapman, late of Game of Thrones. Did you catch him, King Tommen, Taryn?
Oh, that's who he oh, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they
So,
tried
you know,
to, like, age him up a little bit in a way that just did not work at
it's
all.
confusing. It's a little confusing. The age up on Dean Charles is maybe not the best, but I think it's totally fine. But there is so much out there that I think like if you're a Star Wars freak, you have to check it out because you got to complete the set, right? Like you got to go in. But is it Andor quality? Absolutely not. But very little is. Is it better than Boba Fett? I think you and I would agree. I would, for my money, say I'm enjoying this a lot more actually than I enjoyed Obi-Wan. I really didn't like Obi-Wan all that
I
much.
also didn't like
Yeah,
Obi-Wan. I
yeah,
also didn't finish This is, like, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, and The Acolyte are all shows I would start and
yeah,
probably not finish if it was just up to me, which it is, and so
yeah,
I
yeah.
probably won't.
Bye. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'll
it's just
finish it, and
there
if Grace started it, she'll finish it too.
there's one last thing about this. The show just feels plastic. All of these shows just feel plastic to me. There's just a weird quality to them, and it's the same thing with the Marvel shows as well, that they just don't feel right,
Yeah.
to me, and, it translates not only to the visuals, but, like, the story and the pacing, everything just feels just there's too much shine on it, and it's just, meh.
I get that.
Andor, if we're talking about a scale, Andor, I think, was incredible, like,
Yes.
top tier television, and that's where I'd love for all Star Wars content to
Well,
be.
Andor feels like a miracle. Andor feels like something of a miraculous event because it is a show that is existing within this widely prized, if not praised, property for Disney that they spent, billions, a shit ton of money to acquire. They have had middling success with the brand. I think their shows have had a decent amount of success, though I think we are starting to feel a little bit of that fatigue around it. And most of these shows, to that plastic point, there's like an aesthetic piece to that, definitely. I think that there is a relative safety to the way that stories are told, like sort of a hesitancy to approach the third rail. And I think in a story, like in life, don't approach the third rail. In storytelling, I think you want to approach the third rail. And not only did Andor like go to the third rail in ways that the prior Star Wars shows and most, if not all of the Marvel shows, just completely tried to forget that the third rail even existed. Andor was like, we'll do a couple of episodes that are based on the fact that you can't touch the floor because there's a third rail that will electrocute you, and we'll also break out of that.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
it's just so it was so good. It was so good. It's a really difficult standard to live up to for any of these other Star Wars shows, I think.
like Andor for me is the reason why I will continue to keep trying the new Star Wars shows
Yes.
when they come out, because if
Yep.
they hit another Andor, then I'm so in.
Must see TV.
Um, but let's move on to the next show on our list. The Boys season 4 started, and I have watched the first 3 episodes. I will say, my thoughts on The Boys were that I really enjoyed the first season generally. I just think the vibe is fun. Um, it reminds me, I think we compared it a little bit to Fallout, or we have perhaps in the past. Like, the vibe is just, like, very brutal and gruesome, but also lighthearted, and it has that kind of, like, the fun violence, of there's like a specific violent, fun, gruesome tone that some
Yeah.
pieces of media have, and The Boys has
Entrails
this.
have never been so joyous, Taryn.
Yes. I
Right?
like it. I find it fun. But for me, that is like most of what it has going for it. The For me, over the course of the first 3 seasons, the premise has really started to wear thin. And the same has been true so far in season 4 for me. It's just like it feels like we're spinning our wheels, and it's just
Mm,
like, how can we keep everyone in the same place for the most part, doing the same things for 4 seasons long, even though they all have the power to, like, murder each other in 2 seconds?
yeah.
And it has that, for me, like, I think I first described it in season 1 as kind of like a CW show, but R-rated, in terms of, like, the interpersonal drama that often gets in the way of the plot as well. So I do have mixed feelings on The Boys in general. However, season 5 has been announced as the final season for The Boys, and that makes me excited, not for season 4, but for season 5.
Yeah, if anything, actually, it's like, oh no, okay, so I guess we're just gonna have to slog it through season 4.
A little bit.
Because, you know, I'm a Justified fan. I remember what it was like to experience season 5 of Justified, and that season was like, gosh, is this the same show each and every week? Like, we're really dragging this thing out. And then that final season was set up at the end of it, and I went back many years ago now to watch all of Justified ahead of that final season of Justified with Antonio, and our strong takeaway was like, yeah, season 5 is the weakest season for sure, but it did a lot of great setup work for an incredible final season of a show. So my hope, like my low bar hope, Taryn, is that season 4 of The Boys will accomplish that. My low
Yeah.
bar hope is that where season 4 of The Boys positions the universe of the show by the end of it will head us into a final season of the show that'll be really, really worthwhile. But I do think that, like, announcing as your show is premiering that we're also going to end it next season, I'm all about that confident early renewal notice. I'm not even necessarily against that early cancellation notice. It's just it sets expectations in a specific way. I think The Boys is an interesting show to be talking about the same week that we're talking about The Acolyte, Taryn, because I think a lot of the same conversations like bad faith actors and like, is this good? Is this bad? Or are you just being awful? Is sort of the test. It's like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Looking up at the Rotten Tomatoes scores for The Boys, which is a show that is usually really widely celebrated in the audience score section, Taryn. 95% critics approval, 52% audience approval. a real plummet for season 4. And I think a lot of chatter from Eric Kripke, who's the showrunner of Supernatural fame, responding to a lot of fans of The Boys online who feel like, what has happened to the show? What do you mean that like Homelander can just like, I don't know, shoot a guy in the street and that's like okay? Like, what are you talking about? And Eric Kripke's like, interesting, interesting. And so I think that there's like a portion of the audience that is catching up with the show's intent. And the show, in order to make that intent clear, which I think has always been sort of part of the intent of The Boys, is power hungry people in powerful position typically aren't to be totally trusted all the way. People are hiding certain things. And then also, naked evil is also just naked evil. And maybe you should learn how to recognize it a little better. I think like that has always been baked into the premise of The Boys. And now that it's not subtle at all, and now that like the message of the show, there's just straight ripped from the headlines, trials and the premise of season 4 is revolving around not a presidential election, right, but an inauguration.
Mhm.
A little triggering to an American audience today. So it's really engaging that stuff, and I think a certain portion of the Boys audience that was here for exploding penis eye, I think, are really upset that this is the way that the show has gone.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's me, Taran. I don't know if I'm upset in that way, but I think some people are.
yeah, I mean, oftentimes you'll see conversation about The Boys being about like, isn't it funny that like people who were fans of Homelander didn't realize that like Homelander is basically like meant to be a
He's superhero
representation
Trump.
of like
Yeah, yeah,
fascist
yeah,
conservatism. But like it was never subtle about it. Like that's kind of the thing. It's just that I think it's become more and more blatant, and like the quote unquote villains of the show are now like explicitly stating talking points of hateful conservatism in the show now. And so I'm sure that is definitely sort of like spiking some backlash, especially because I think that like like I said, the tone of the show I think lends itself to an audience of people who maybe trend a little more conservative in
yeah.
general. So I definitely think it's fighting that battle for sure. But that part of it is like fine for me. I
Yeah.
don't really.
Yeah.
It's like yeah, sure. That's this is okay.
Well,
It's
I think that The Boys and so The Boys is based on a comic book by Garth Ennis, and I believe it's is it Scott Derrickson is the illustrator? I'm not 100% sure on that off the top of my head, but I think maybe. And it is no, Scott Derrickson's a filmmaker. Derek Robertson, I believe, is the name of I still probably am getting this right. Anyway, it's based on a comic book, and Garth Ennis is the creator, and he was the creator of Preacher and Punisher Max. He wrote a lot of those, and his signature is just like ultra violence just being used in the way that a musical uses a song, right? To like relieve the tension. That something incredibly gross happens to relieve the tension. But I think also Garth Ennis' storytelling sensibilities, at least in his comics, if not always in his shows, has often been to like we've suckered in a certain type of consumer to read this comic, to view this show because they're here for the ultra violence. And while they're here for the ultra violence, there's something that's like also like underneath that layer. There's a secret sauce that you're ingesting that if you are going to ingest enough of it, you're going to become aware of it. And maybe you will continue to want to engage it, or maybe you'll be like, no, I see what you're doing and I don't want to do it anymore. I think The Boys has increasingly become a state where that secret sauce, everyone knows it's just ketchup and mayo now, right? Like
mm,
everybody knows like what's actually making that thing, what the ingredients are. And I think some people are there's the people who are rejecting it because it feels like they're being belittled. I think that there are also the people who are rejecting it because now it feels a little ham-fisted. And that I totally understand. I do think in season 4 it feels really on the nose in a way that it hasn't before. maybe part of that, Taran, is reflective of like certain people really need it on the nose in order to know what it is. So this might not totally be the show's fault. But I'm a little tired of some of like the just like true like the true headline formula that's baked into season 4 so far. That being said, the characters are great. The characters have been, I think the characters are in some pretty interesting places here in season 4 so far.
I think I said the vibe is, or the tone is maybe like most of what it has going for it, but that is also, I think, forgetting the performances, because I think the performances are really good in the show. And I think that's really what has carried it as far as it's gone, is that, like, the actors really, like, so many of them just do such a great job, portraying their characters in such an interesting way. They're so
Yeah.
captivating, so, that is definitely another strength of the show for sure.
Anthony Starr as Homelander is just like, I mean, you could just watch his face for 5 minutes straight, and an entire novel is written, right? Like, just the human experience is just all over that guy, for better and for so much worse. And I think Carl Urban, I think, is doing some interesting stuff this season with Billy Butcher, who's sort of the main character of the show and is kind of like your gruff, tough English bar brawler type. And I think that he's having a lot of fun playing that character, and his character is in a place this season that seems to be a lot deadlier than it's been in the past on like an emotional level. There's some urgency to his story this season that I'm really really appreciating. So I've enjoyed all of that, and I am a deranged person, Taryn. I enjoy when The Boys gets disgusting, because it goes places that no show is willing to go. And I think, is it the second or the third episode of the 3 episodes that have been released that features one of the a visual that I really like. If I could just like go into my brain with my hand and I could just like pluck out memories, Taryn, if you could do it that way, there are some memories from The Boys season 4 already that I would eliminate. I would
I think it says a lot about this show that I have a bunch of different moments flashing through my mind right now about what you could be talking about.
Yeah, I'll use 2 words and let's see if you remember it. You ready?
Mhm.
Human
Yep.
centipede.
That was my top choice.
Should I say superhuman centipede? Uh, no thanks. All good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No mas. No mas.
Well, I will say this, if you like Anthony Starr and you like, a taste of the old ultra violence, check out his show Banshee. I think that's a very
Antonio is huge into Banshee. I believe Colin Stone's a big Banshee guy as well.
yeah,
Both
yeah.
of them have tried to get me to watch Banshee. If you're on it, did you see the whole thing?
I don't know that I ever finished it actually,
Yeah.
but it's basically like very good action. A little bit thin on plot sometimes, but like very fun action scenes. Very well done stuff,
Is
especially
this
for
sort of like
TV.
Justified meets Suits is my head canon of how I would describe it.
Uh, that's a very weird
Yeah.
combination,
We could
but
go we'll do the Banshee deep dive. We'll get the gang together.
all right. Well, that's those are like kind of the main shows to talk about, but there's some other stuff going on.
Bridgerton's having a big moment that I'm not prepared to talk about because I got to catch up on Bridgerton. But I know a lot of people have wanted to see from the RHAP scripted podcast some Bridgerton coverage, and I think we'll have you covered before too much longer, just not today.
Well, here's what I'll say about Bridgerton. I actually did recently give it a shot. I'm not somebody that is like opposed to like romance or period romance or anything like that. Like I'm in as long as I feel like the characters are well done and it doesn't annoy me too much with like, because these shows, the like keep the love interests apart with like dumb reasons. If the
Yeah.
reasons are too dumb, I just get too annoyed.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the case with Bridgerton. So I kind of dropped out of Bridgerton after like 4 or 5 episodes.
Yeah.
Um, wasn't quite for me, but I know it is very popular, and there's a lot of hubbub about season 3 right
Yeah.
now.
Nicola Coughlin. I don't know if you were you a Dairy Girls fan?
I also tried Dairy Girls.
Yeah.
I thought it was fun.
I
Just
love
like
Dairy Girls. Yeah.
this is the thing. I am a tastemaker. I have tasted a lot of shows,
Yeah.
And I have gotten to the point where I don't finish a good portion of them because there's just too many for me to watch all the way through. So if I want to be able to say I've seen Dairy Girls, I have to watch 2 episodes of Dairy Girls and be like, "Ah, okay."
Yeah. Now you've seen Dairy Girls.
Yeah,
But she had my loyalty from Dairy Girls, so I feel like I have to catch up because every season, as I am to understand, is like a different character-centric season, basically, and
that makes sense based on the marketing.
it's hers this season, and I love her. And some of the stuff she's been saying in the press has made me. I've been following the Bridgerton press tour, and the Bridgerton press tour has been incredible.
Mm.
So I do plan on catching up on Bridgerton in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, another show that's been recommended to us is, Evil. We might talk a little bit more about that in future podcasts. I will say I have also tried that show. I'm actually a big fan of The Kings, who made The Good Wife, and The Good Fight, which I really liked at the start and then went completely off the rails.
Yeah,
But they've made some other very fun shows, so I was definitely willing to give Evil a chance. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. In fact, I think it's probably a very good show for like what it is, a network show that is kind of procedural. But I think for me, it's just like I have so much trouble with that kind of show nowadays. I've tried even some of the good like sitcoms that are out, like the Ghosts one and Abbott
yeah, yeah.
Elementary, and I can see that they're good, but it's just I think that format has just lost me entirely at this point, and so not quite for me, but I do know that it is well regarded.
I love Evil. I'm at least a full season now, probably like a season and a half behind, so I have to catch up. I do think it's interesting that the Kings, the couple behind the show, only make shows that are good or evil. So they make The Good Wife, they make The Good Fight, or they make
Well,
Evil and Elsbeth.
one of my favorite shows that they made was actually oh god, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It had a weird name. But it had like a great song. Uh
Like a theme song,
like
or
a
like
theme song that was like a
uh
recap of every previous episode.
oh wow.
Um
Okay.
and it will as soon as it comes to me, I will know it
Evil's
was
fascinating though because
Brain Dead
oh, that's interesting.
with Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I loved Brain
Oh,
Dead.
well, I love her, so,
Yeah.
gotta check that out. But Evil's
Short
interesting
one
because
season run.
it's been on for a few seasons now. It was on CBS. It gets ping-ponged to Paramount Plus, so now it's a streaming show, and it was already, like, pretty gnarly when it was a CBS show, and now it can do things that it couldn't do in the CBS slot, but it just had this huge Netflix bump because it was on Netflix.
Mm,
It's really amazing what just the virtue of being on Netflix does for your show. Like it's
yeah.
just like the amount of attention that is now on Evil is incredible because in the past it just was like for me when I was watching that first season especially it felt like a dirty little secret
Mm.
because Michael Emerson, who's Benjamin Linus from Lost and the special guest from a certain episode of Robin and Kiva Need a podcast, is evil on evil in a way that makes Benjamin Linus like absolutely go into the church, man. Like you're good. Like go into the church, you're totally fine. Like you're fine. You get to be in there with all those people. His character on Evil is just fucked. There's just no other word to describe him.
Name of the show.
Yeah. Yeah, fucked is the name of the show.
Well, evil.
Yeah, oh, different show, different show.
Yeah. All right, let's continue the lightning round here. There's shows I have been watching. I started Dark Matter, which has been running, and this is based on a book that I have actually read. Just like I happen to have read it. It wasn't like my favorite book. I thought it was fine. I will say it has the basic premise is that it's kind of like a sci-fi story and it deals with kind of like multiple universes and so there's like a bit of a kidnapping and hilarity ensues but
As
it's
often
dark.
happens
It
in
hilarity does not ensue. It's a
yeah.
dark show. Dark matter. It's dark matter.
Well, that
um
that is what I heard is that it is like a real serious show. And I don't mean that in terms of like necessarily like it's great. But what the vibes that I've heard are like this show is it's about real serious science fiction stuff, guys. And like we're gonna
Very
take
much
it
so.
real seriously.
I would say one of my critiques of the book, at least, is that it sometimes didn't take its subject matter as seriously as it should.
Yeah.
Like really dark things are happening, and it's like, do you understand how dark this is? Because you're not really putting it into the book, how dark this is. The thing I'll say about it is that this is a descriptor I've only used for myself, so I don't know if it will translate to anybody else. It has divorced dad energy.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but it's like this energy that some stories have. It's usually like it's a guy. Sometimes he's still married to his wife. Sometimes he's like divorced from his wife. But it always has this sort of obsession with the wife character and a very like idealized version of her. And he's always just like he's like a cool guy, but he's always trying to win her back usually or in some way. And it's just there's a bunch of stories that have this energy. I don't know if anybody else will like connect with what I'm saying here, but it very much has that this show for me. And the
Interesting.
the book did at least for me. The show a little bit less so, but definitely still.
I think it's inevitable that I'm gonna check this out just because I'm always interested in at least peeping what the Apple shows are about. I have I assume that a lot of our listeners will be able to relate to like having a podcast app that's just like filled with incomplete listens. Like I'll go back, I'll finish that, and then like an avalanche of podcasts come out, and so you can't go back. But like someday you really think that you're gonna, and maybe someday you do. Uh, I have like so many of those in the Apple Rolodex. Like I have to go back and finish Foundation. I put 6 episodes into Foundation. And it was
Ooh.
really pretty, and I know that it's
Foundation
supposed,
got better in season
and
2.
that's what I hear. So like, there's like so many shows like that on Apple, and I feel like Dark Matter is going to be that for me. It's got people who I really like. Joel Edgerton, I keep rooting for. Like someone let this work for Joel. Like really rooting for Joel. Jennifer Connelly is never a no. So I'm interested in it. And I love a multiverse premise, especially for like some of that like nose to the grindstone kind of sci-fi. Did you check out Counterpart? Were you a
Yep.
Counterpart guy?
I
Uh
I I liked it, not as much as most people did.
I loved it.
It was a
Loved it.
little slow, I think, for me overall, but
Yeah, but I love that vibe.
yeah.
I really love like that slow pressure cooker spy type of vibe, which is why I kicked myself for taking so long to like get to Slow Horses, where like a vibe can be like that, where it can sort of like really stretch
Slow
out over
Horses also lost me.
it's these Apple S shows, man. There's so many of them. You just have to choose your competitor. So I really do love that kind of pacing. And Counterpart had like, like my Jack Bauer itches scratched while my Fringe itches scratched. Like that's a good combo platter for me.
I will say Dark Matter is more Jack Bauer than Counterpart for sure.
Okay, all right. Well,
And I also think for what it's worth, and this is the last thing I'll say on it, is that the show so far, I'm 2 episodes in, is working a bit better for me than the book did. I feel like the story translates a little better to TV than it did to the book, so far for me. So
yeah.
that's I am enjoying it. I think it's a fun watch, fun for me because I like dark things. Um,
Yeah, my Apple show
yeah.
that is also in the sci-fi space that is also from this year that I just finished watching is Sugar. Have
Mm.
you heard of Sugar, Taryn?
I watched 2 episodes of Sugar
2 episodes of
before
Sugar.
before I bailed, and
Mhm.
and that one, I have heard that perhaps I should not have bailed so early because there were some things that I needed to continue to see.
There are questions, Taryn, about whether that's your fault or their fault. And I think very valid questions that are probably more on the line of like, I think it's probably their fault. That being said, Sugar, for anyone who hasn't checked it out or hasn't encountered it at all, it's like it's set in the modern day, but it has 1940s LA noir type of
Yeah.
vibes. Like it feels like LA Confidential to the point that James Cromwell is there and you immediately don't trust him. Colin Farrell is the lead, and he plays a private eye named John Sugar, who loves movies, who loves solving crimes, and seems to just be like professional best guy. Like he is just nice. He gives you the coat off his back. He gives you a cell phone if you need it. Like John Sugar, ultimate dude, great dude. There is a thing about the TV show on Apple TV Plus called Sugar that you do not know about until the further you get into Sugar. Taran, that's called a plot twist. Just in
Yes.
case people aren't aware of what it is I'm sketching out.
Mhm.
What
Yes. There's more to the show than what it
and
seems,
meets the eye.
and you don't find out until longer than I gave it a shot for.
I think it's an
Um,
8 episode season, and I think you find out in episode 6. I think that's right.
so, like,
The ratio
is
is
it
there anyway.
the question is, like, is it worth it to watch the show for the thing? For me, I think, the answer is probably no, but
Yeah.
it probably would have been very fun for me to experience the thing.
So I knew the thing before I hit play. There was a great Vulture article I'm not going to tell you what the actual title of it was because it is the full on spoiler. But basically, the title is "Spoil Sugar for Your Friends." Is basically the headline, and the headline is the actual spoiler. And the article argues if you know what the spoiler is, and you probably should have from in that first episode, you might really dig it. Like if you view it from the certain framework that of what the show actually is, you might enjoy it even more. And I'll say, Taran, that knowing what the big sugar twist was while watching it, I loved sugar. I had a great time watching Sugar. When the thing happens, I popped off. I was like, "Wow, weirder than I thought." But it's there. Like the language for the twist is totally there from the very beginning. If you know what you're looking for, it's just you would have no reason to look for the things that you're looking for without knowing. So if Sugar sounds interesting to you, what I would say is look up that Vulture article, knowing that you're going to get spoiled immediately on what the Sugar spoiler is, and then watch the show knowing what the spoiler is. And I do expect you'll like it more. Or you'll read the spoiler and you'll know, like, no, sorry, show's not for me at all.
I would say if you like modern noir and you like would enjoy just the show proper, you might want to just give it a chance blind. But if you're thinking you might want to drop it or if it's just not for you, look up then look up the
Then
the
look it up.
article and
Yeah.
and decide from there for sure.
Yep. Yep.
Um okay. Just a couple more. I did watch the first 2 episodes of Presumed Innocent, the new
Also on
Jake
Apple.
Gyllenhaal
Yeah.
show on Apple. And this is like it's a crime drama based on a book. I did not read this book. I would definitely say emphasis on the drama side of this. It's very much like I think going to be like court trial focused and a little bit of mystery on
Yeah.
like kind of who done it kind of deal. But
It's not
again,
a
lots
John
of
Grisham show, but it's not a John Grisham show.
yeah, it's very by the books, very kind of like not a unique premise by any means, but Jake Gyllenhaal is Jake Gyllenhaal in it, so that's really fun. And by that I mean he's very good. He just is very good at most of anything he does. I don't think I would care to watch through the whole thing just because it's like unless there's some kind of big twist in this show, like like
Yeah.
it's just another one of these shows. But if it's a guy, if it's one of those shows that you like, I think you might like it because it is fairly well done and acted and stuff like that.
I haven't seen any headlines that say "Spoil Presumed Innocent for your friends."
Well, only 2 episodes so
Uh-huh.
far. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and
Yeah.
then there's another one on Netflix called The 8 Show. This is a Korean show that is. Uh, I saw it and I was like, oh, they're copying Squid Game. Ah, I
Hey, that
see. I
worked,
see you, Netflix.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Is it some sort of
it's
death arena? Are we dealing with another death arena, Taran?
it's very much there are contestants. I will spoil. There are 8 contestants on
Okay.
the 8 show. And they are taking part in theoretically a show that's being broadcast to a certain audience. And they have to do things and they will make money and they need the money, most of them. And so uh it's very much like it's less so like they're playing games that are deadly and more so how can they function as a mini society in this game show-esque environment
Mm,
and get along and not like murder each other.
interesting.
And it is very, I would say, cartoony at first. Like the characters are they feel very like anime, and I think that's because it's based on a webtoon. Um, But once you kind of like get the vibe, it's pretty fun. I enjoyed it.
Well,
I'm like 3 or 4 episodes in.
I was gonna say, from what I know about you and your taste, and certainly what I know about me and mine, like that description of like live action anime is not a turnoff. Like if you know it, if you know to expect it, if you sign up for that, then like I'm often going to be very on board.
It did take me back, like, initially, I was like, "Ooh, this wasn't really what I thought this was," but then
Yeah.
once I was like, "Okay, no, I can wrap my head around this," I was like, "Okay, I can accept it for what it is," and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I guess for me, speaking of Netflix and speaking of animated adaptations, I have finally begun One Piece, the live action
Ooh.
version of One Piece.
I really enjoyed it.
At the urging of a friend who is a huge One Piece guy. And I feel really, really late and I feel very foolish because I love a pirate story. I love a good pirate adventure and I love a good lighthearted pirate adventure. I love a heavy pirate adventure too. I know Black Sails is waiting for me someday. Uh,
That
but
is
I
not lighthearted.
but that's not lighthearted. I love a lighthearted pirate tale, and One Piece has been great. I'm just only one episode in, and I feel like I'm gonna. I feel like I'm gonna savor it, aka go really slow through it. Savor is probably the wrong thing because if ever there was like a universe that you could binge upon, it would be One Piece. I am to understand there are 500 plus episodes of the anime and however many issues of the manga. My friend has said you could just watch the live action and you'll be fine. So I feel absolved.
I tried to watch the anime, and there was too much of it, and there's too much just, like, filler stuff. So I'd planned on doing, like, one of those, like, guided watches where they
Yeah.
skip you through the or just read the manga, but then the live action came out, I was like, "I'll watch this," and now they actually are going to remake, I've heard, the anime in a more focused,
Okay. So
sort
they're
of
gonna.
thing, so I
It's
may
not gonna
watch
be
that as
like
well.
DBZ where every episode was 2 minutes of a fight. Like they're
Well,
gonna.
DBZ abridged, is
Yeah.
the way to go
Is
nowadays, I
that
think.
real? That's a thing.
Oh, you know what? No, they did it officially. It's Dragon Ball Z Kai now. It was like the official abridged kind of version of it, I think,
You
where they
learn
redid some
something.
of the voices and animation.
You learn something useful every week on the Tastemakers.
If you ever wanna watch Dragon Ball Z, I would recommend Kai,
Yeah, okay,
for
cool.
you.
Good to know. You know One Piece does very well? It has a main character who's lightest of spoilers, whose main character is being like uber stretchy, like
Mhm.
Stretch Armstrong, Mr. Fantastic style. And when has this ever looked good in live action? And they figured it out. I feel like Luffy's like stretchy powers, really great camera tricks to
Yeah.
make it look to make it really fun and propulsive too. So just on that first episode alone, I was really sold on One Piece, and if not for the fact that gotta catch up on the boys, gotta catch up on the Acolyte, gotta catch up on House of the Dragon. I don't know if you heard this, Taryn, but the Bear is on the way, so I'm binging the Bear to get back in my Bear business right now. There's Bridgerton. There's so much TV. I'm so glad that Rob supplied you and Grace with a fork and knife to eat it all.
Yes, that is what we are here for. We are going to stay on top of it, or at least as much of it as we can manage for all of you. So I think that's about what we have this week for the Tastemakers.
That's what we've got for the Tastemakers this week. Of course, if you want to make sure you never miss an episode of the podcast, subscribe to the RHAP. We know scripted TV feed. Rob has a website.com/subscribe, has all of that info. You can watch us on YouTube as well. Rob has a website.com/subscribe, Taryn.
Yes, and worry not, Grace will be back to
Yeah. I'll go
explain.
back into like the secret floorboards that I live under during a Tastemakers podcast.
Yes. So stay tuned for next week. We'll chat more about TV, and we will also talk about movies here and there. Not a ton of movie news happening right now. I did see Inside Out 2, and it's doing very well at the box office. But when there's more to talk about that's at least relevant to our tastes, we will let you know. But thank you all so much for joining us this week on the Tastemakers, and we'll see all of you next time.